we are live. Welcome, Melissa, to the Unhustle podcast, where I love connecting with legendary entrepreneurs and leaders and founders who, in a way, redefine their success. And somebody sent me your interview on CBS, and I immediately reached out to Cherie to say the world needs to hear your story. So you are a creator, an entrepreneur, a leader, and you and Doug, your husband Doug, built the iconic Connecticut-based toy maker company. You built into a $500 million business. You designed more than 1,000 plus toys. Had a happy marriage, 6 children. Wow. And from the outside in, it looked like everything was going great. From the inside out, probably not so much. So take me a little bit to that moment in time where you said, I'm going to start another company called Lifelines.
Wow, that's a loaded question. There's so much behind that. But just to start, I think, even the way you describe me is all external, right? It's a lot of things talking about like external measures of success. It's like she has everything. She built a big company. She's legendary. She created this many toys. And that's very much how we view success in society from the outside in. And it's all about like chasing it out there, the pursuit of happiness. Like, let's go. It's out there. Keep going for it. And the problem is that I reached it. Like, I achieved every single thing I had ever dreamed of and more. Like, there is nothing else I could have wanted materially. There's nothing else I could have wanted, business-wise. I mean, we've now sold 1 billion units of toys, which is like, I can't even believe. And I have an amazing relationship to my husband. We have 6 children. Like, it was all amazing. But the problem is, if you are chasing it out there and you can only find it in here, that's a big distance. So the further I got out there, the further away I got from what truly was my meaning and could only be found within. So I think what started to happen is that race, which I call the feudal race, started to get more and more exhausting. And when we're young, I think of it as a dam that's repressing the truth of who we are. And that dam is strong. Mine was really strong because I had a lot of repression. So in my 20s, it was strong. In my 30s, it was strong. As I started to get into my 40s, like when you're hiding behind a facade and kind of denying your authenticity, it's exhausting. There's actually nothing more exhausting. And the more I started to hear that cry of my soul saying like, see me, hear me as who I am, the dam started to weaken. And finally, in my late 40s, that dam started to spring a whole bunch of leaks. And that's when I knew that something needed to change.
Thank you for that. And we're actually live currently on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook. And there are people joining in saying hi to you. So
hey everybody, thanks for joining.
We're going to be taking some questions. People have actually been sending me questions already ahead of time. So you said, ask me something that no one's asked me before. So
please.
So far.
I'm ready.
I've been reading your book. I'm halfway through your book. Fantastic, by the way. Love your poetry.
Oh, thank you.
And love the stories. And we can talk about the guy that called you sophomoric, because I'm working on my book. And didn't he call it like sophomoric writing? And so you stopped writing for 25 years?
Yep.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I think we all have a form of self-expression, right? Which is our most innate truth. And mine has always come out very simply. From the time I was 2 years old, I saw these rhyming verses in my head, and they're super simple. They're kind of like Hallmark greeting cards. I wish they were more complicated, but what they're trying to do is distill really abstruse concepts into simple sort of truths that can help me to understand things better. So they come out really simple. And when we had an issue with Melissa and Doug, and we decided we were going to leave toys and do something else, we were still boyfriend and girlfriend then. We decided that we were going to apply to graduate school. And I had written these verses for years. I'd never shown them to anyone. I had thousands of them, like collecting dust. But I thought, if there's anything I want to do, it's to be a poet and teach creative writing and get an MFA. So we applied to these graduate programs. And as part of the application, I had to submit about 50 to 100 of these verses. And I was so excited because I had never shown them to anyone. And, I'm such a fan of Robert Frost and Emily Dickinson. And my wildest dream was that I would be, ever even remotely thought of as having some ability to touch people with these verses. Well, I applied to a really mediocre program that wasn't even listed in any of the best of, and I got really horribly rejected, to the point where the head of the department who reviewed it said, your writing is sophomoric and not of the caliber our program requires. And even being a writer, I had never really heard the word sophomoric. But when I looked it up, the words that defined it made truly my heart stop. It was foolish, silly, dumb, dim-witted, stupid.
Aww.
Yeah.
Who says that?
And I am telling you, when something that merges out of you organically gets told that it's dumb and dim-witted and not worthy of a really horrible program to begin with, it is soul-crushing. And it really was soul-crushing, to the point where I didn't show it. And we ended up, thank goodness, continuing on with Melissa and Doug and not going to grad school. So it didn't really end up playing out. But it truly made it so I stopped writing verses altogether for the next almost 30 years. Now, the positive is I channeled that same philosophy, right? Simplicity over complexity, and really connecting on a soul level immediately and not having to decipher it. I channeled that same philosophy into making 10,000 toys. So I did, thank goodness, get validation for it, but it was really probably the worst. I mean, I've suffered a lot of rejection. That was probably the worst rejection I ever suffered.
Which is really interesting because you called yourself a closet creative when this happened. And so you're a poet, a musician, but then early on in your life went into more of a career of being a lawyer and an investment banker. And so,
yeah, that's comical. Yeah, because, nobody, I was all about societal validation, right?
Yeah.
And being sort of seen as someone who was really intellectually up there and going to be successful. And creative people back in that day were not thought of as like winners at all. It was all pre-professional. I was in the era where you became a doctor or a lawyer or a business person, and you did that your whole life, right? And you moved up the treadmill of performance. And creative, I didn't even associate with being a creative. No one ever called me creative. I write things in my head, but never did I think of myself as a creative. So I decided when I was about 12 that it would sound really good to be a lawyer. And because when I told my family, they were like, oh, wow, you want to be a lawyer? And everyone seemed to think that was really cool, even though law is the most rigid, it's all about within the lines and the law, and I'm completely white space creative. But anyway, yes, I went down these very rigid paths because they were societally respected, not because they made my heart sing.
Yeah. So now fast forward, and you sell the company and you decide to start something that you call it's your ikigai. It's where you find your meraki, to use the Greek word. Being Bulgarian, I know exactly what that means. Finding your gusto in life, right? How can somebody do that if they don't necessarily have the financial stability?
That's an amazing question. And I think finding meaning and crafting a life of meaning has become my purpose to help others do that. And that's a question that gets asked all the time, because so many of us do not have the luxury of making our job our meaning. And that's perfectly okay. In fact, I almost think that's better sometimes, because meaning, and I equate meaning with play, which is something that you do purely for the joy of it and no ulterior motive, should be done without any financial connection. And I think sometimes we can work a job that is a job. I mean, it doesn't mean, by the way, and I help people to find meaning in a job that's lost its meaning, because your attitude alone can change that. But sometimes you can't, let's say you can't find any meaning in your job, and it's a job. But guess what? Its meaning is it's paying the bills, and it's allowing you to support maybe your family, and it's allowing you to support your passions outside of work. So even reframing a job in that can be meaningful. And then it's all about taking the time you have outside of work, which we all have time, even though we say we don't. If you do a life map and you start to really look at how you're using your time, taking that time and very deliberately making it filled with activities that bring your life meaning. And it can be, most of the time, if it's really going to bring meaning, it should be involving a volunteer service component. So, volunteering at a humane society or a senior center, or fostering children or tutoring kids, teaching Sunday school, joining any sort of group, that, singing group, a dancing group. So, but it has to be deliberate. It's not something you can do once a month and think that that's going to bring your life meaning. If your life is feeling devoid of meaning, which, by the way, it's an epidemic now, people, because what COVID did is it stopped us short. We basically, everything we were doing that we thought brought our lives meaning, right? We were on this treadmill of activity, constant motion, doing our things. And we thought like our life was okay. Most of us, it was. We were really just going through the motions, and then halt. And then all of a sudden we have the aperture open to look at our lives. And suddenly most of us are like, wow, gosh, why was I doing all this stuff? I'm not happy in my job. I'm not happy in my relationships. I'm treading water. And it threw us all into an existential meaning crisis. And so I'm speaking to tons of people every single day about this. And it's really about sort of doing a new assessment of your life, and ultimately defining what you value, defining what your ideals are, and then aligning those to your actions in some small ways that can get you closer to that idea of meaning.
Thank you for that. As somebody who lives that strategy, I can concur that it could be challenging sometimes too.
But most of us are not going to find meaning through our jobs. At least the meaning like we're going to put our whole soul into it. We can find meaning even in our relationships with our coworkers, but I mean the meaning that like fulfills your life.
And so are you saying that the play part,
yes,
could be where people can find more meaning and purpose?
Be, and it will be. Yeah. I mean, we talk about it as you must cultivate your pastimes, your pleasures, and your passions. And those are truly like outside of any of your work. And it's better that they are. It is hard, even though at Melissa and Doug, hey, I was finding tremendous meaning in making toys. For 32 years, I was there making toys. But the truth was, many days it was a job, because we had customers that wanted it to be at a certain price point, and we had customers that wanted it to look a certain way. And, I wasn't totally free to do whatever the heck I wanted. So it still had aspects of it that weren't entirely my passion. Whereas when I craft on my own, it's whatever, and that's the point of play. It's whatever, play is intrinsically motivated, it's self-directed, and it's freely chosen. And your job is not that. So if you want to really have it be meaningful, it should be those three qualities, freely chosen, self-directed, and intrinsically motivated. And then it will truly lead to a sense of meaning.
Thank you for that. I'm going to share something with you that I personally find fascinating, and I want to see what you think about it. You're familiar with the concept of flow?
Oh, yeah.
and with Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's
Love
book
his
Flow.
books. Yep.
And so I was reading his book, and all of a sudden I saw this thing in the book that really was a light bulb moment for me. And that was that even though we say we'd rather not be working, most of us, and we'd rather have more leisure time, for most of us, we find flow in work because we're pushed, we are creative, we have deadlines, we feel good when we check off our to-do list. So we're actually, based on his research, about 64% of the time we're in flow at work.
Mm-hmm.
In our leisure time, we're only in flow about 20% of the time because mainly we're in that passive time. And to me, that was fascinating research to see that, hey, if we fix our leisure time, if we play more, we can actually increase our well-being, increase our fulfillment, increase our joy, find more purpose. Have you found that this research at all, does that resonate with you at all?
It resonates completely. In fact, I have had to be validated by my existential psychotherapist mentor to say, creating is my form of being. Meaning, I can't just sit. When I sit still, I fall into an existential depression.
Right.
I have to be creating something all the time. Even if I'm watching a frivolous TV show, I'm always doing something. I'm
Right.
crafting something, or I'm making earrings, because for me, that is meaning. It's turning the unease into something tangible. So I think it depends on who we are, but I think what it says is, I think we're born a lot of times thinking that life is just going to be easy, right? That it's just going to deliver butterflies and rainbows and meadows and, beauty, and we don't have to do anything. So we all grow up with an expectation. And so many women especially say to me, it's not what I thought it was supposed to be. Life isn't what I expected it to be. And it's because we have that expectation. But the truth is, finding your passions, right? Finding your meaning takes a whole lot of work. And you've got to try a whole bunch of things to get into the flow, because flow also has another component, which is your skill level has to keep increasing. And you have to feel just enough challenge, not too much challenge, or you become dissatisfied and you want to quit. But if it has too little challenge, you become lethargic and you want to quit. So it has to have just enough challenge that it makes you want to continue to do it. And that's hard to find activities that have just that amount of challenge. So it's a continual, and you change over life too. So I think, in all the training that I'm getting now in sort of healing through meaning, and I'm really studying to become a logotherapist, which is someone who helps people heal through finding meaning. It really stipulates from the beginning that life is going to be hard, and you have to choose to want to invest in making your life have meaning. And that means that it's going to be continued practice, and things are going to change. Something that might have brought your life meaning yesterday. I mean, I'm always changing my hobbies and my pastimes. I might have done, I'm a rabid crafter, and something that brought me joy like a month ago, I'm always like, I want to try something new. And I think it's because it loses the challenge, and I want to try, honing a new skill. So I think if we realize that earlier on, that it's okay that it's hard, and part of the joy of life is going through that discovery process and checking the things off the list that don't light you up, that don't get you into the flow, and saying, I'm not sure about this one, but I'm willing to investigate it more. Like, that's what you have to do, especially if your job is not bringing you meaning. Then that means you're going to have to really find those things outside of your work that can craft that. I think of it as a tapestry of meaning.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I can't wait to follow you on the journey of the logotherapy. That's Viktor Frankl, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Melissa, when you start Lifelines, what was your vision for Lifelines when you first started, and has that changed over the course of time?
Wow, that's a good question. I love that question. You know what? Believe it or not, the most meaningful work I started doing at Lifelines, and I still do today, is just talking to individuals. Because for me, it's about helping to save that person who might not want to go through being here another day, and trying to convince them that life has meaning. Because, I used Viktor Frankl to save me, his story, because he could find hope in the face of being stripped of every dignity known to man. And I felt like if he could find a reason for going on and actually develop this entire philosophy that life has meaning under all circumstances, then darn it, I could too. So I think knowing that man's primary motivation, or all of people's primary motivation, is the search for meaning. When I see people who have fallen into despair, I know it's because they don't have meaning in their lives. And I know they're terrified that they won't find it. But I know it's possible for every one of us if we choose to take responsibility for doing so. So that really is what I'm trying to do. One by one, I'm trying to get people to believe in investing themselves in their own lives and making meaning. And then I think our greater work is working with organizations and corporations and showing people that doing this work takes a daily deliberate practice. And I've created a practice for myself to find meaning called Practice Makes Purpose. And now at Lifelines, we have a beautiful team that's turned that into a whole bunch of workshops to help individuals sort of, even at companies, really invest in their physical, their emotional, their mental, and their spiritual well-being, be their best selves. We call it potentialize, and really make the most of their time here.
Fascinating. And I hear that you're also developing some well-being products.
We are. Yep. So I think one of the hardest things for individuals, at least for me, was to get from my head, which was a ruminating or neurotic mess, to my heart that just wanted to be free. And
how did you do that?
I needed a bridge. And really, it became through using my senses. So I couldn't meditate. I'm not flexible, so I couldn't do yoga. And I realized that anytime I engaged my senses, anytime I walked in nature, anytime I listened to music, anytime I drank my tea, my warm tea with all the smells and tastes, that brought me immediately out of my ruminating head and sort of into coming home to my heart and being more responsive. So I wanted to create products that could be that bridge for us to get from here, our head, to our hearts. So we're creating products that fall under all our senses that really are that catalyst, that spark. And I'm really excited because, after making products for Melissa and Doug for over 3 decades, I always was able to put myself in the mind of a child, probably because I'm so simple. But now I'm making products for myself and for people like me, which feels like the greatest gift ever.
Awesome. Tell me, on a day-to-day basis, how do you have any practices, or how do you access your intuition when there's big decisions to be made? Or do you?
Oh my gosh, I do. Yeah, I think one of the tricks I use, I call it the journey to inner space, and it's my most effective tool, and I use it about 10 times every day. So, life is a challenge between staying grounded in our hearts, right? And going into reactivity, unconscious mode in our heads. And as humans, we're always triggered, right? People always trigger us. We get upset, we react, and then we judge ourselves for reacting. That's kind of the human pattern. So I've developed a 5-letter pathway to not do that. And basically it follows the letters of space, because we're trying to gain space from our reactive heads and our responsive hearts. So whenever I get triggered, let's say one of my kids says something, right, that really annoys me, and I'm about to say something that I'm going to regret, and it's going to make them feel horrible. I stop and sense. That's the S. I stop and I sense what's going on. Uh-oh, you're about to lose it, Melissa. You got triggered. Don't do it. Then I perceive what's going on. What am I feeling? like what emotion is coming up with me, and I picture where it is. Okay, you're feeling really tight in your chest, you're feeling tight in your neck. Like I sense where it's where it resides in my body. And then A is I accept that it's in my body and that I am feeling this emotion because it's a natural emotion. And also accept and allow. I allow it to flow through my body, even though it's a negative emotion, because generally we start to judge it and we resist it. But I let it, if it's anger, if it's bitterness, if it's jealousy, I just let it run through my body. Then C is comprehend and correct. I try to comprehend, where is that trigger coming from? Why are you getting so annoyed when your child tells you that you're wrong? And I realize usually these triggers are because we have an unprocessed trauma or wound from childhood that hasn't been effectively dealt with. That's always it for me. I'm like, well, because I wasn't respected for my opinion as a child and still today, like I get really untethered if people say they don't trust my opinion. So I understand that it's not because of them, it's because of me. And then I try to correct the mind story. If the mind story is nobody trusts my opinion, I say, Melissa, that's not true. There are tons of people that trust your opinion. And I try to reframe it and tell myself the new truth. And then E is I embrace myself for being human and fallible, because we are imperfectly human. So I say, you're okay as you are. You're going to be triggered. You're going to make mistakes. That is perfectly okay. And then I engage in the flow of life. I don't hide away. I don't become bitter. I don't say, why did you do that? I go back and I re-engage in the flow of life. So I do that in maybe 1 to 2 minutes. I do it so quickly now. And every time I do it, the trigger gets less and less. So we're never going to get to the point where we're not triggered. Like as long as we're human and we're living in society, maybe if we're on some mountain and we're a Yana yogi, we might not. But if we're living in society, it's not that we don't have the triggers. It's how we deal with them. And now I don't react. I take that pause and I gain the space. And usually I'm able to just kind of move on without saying the thing that I wanted to say. And it dissipates and everything goes back to, equanimity.
I love it. It's a beautiful mindfulness practice. I had to do exactly that this morning.
I have to do it all the time.
So I know exactly what you mean.
Yep.
Like when you said, how are you doing today? Well, I was like, well, I'm doing okay. I had to do a little reshifting, a little bit of sitting with my emotions. Yeah. And that's thanks for sharing that. It kind of puts it into perspective. Easy. Do you, at your level of success, do you think imposter syndrome still exists?
I think imposter syndrome lives in the head. So when we start to think about what we're doing and get in that, am I going to be good enough? Are people going to, care about what I'm doing? That's ego, right? Imposter syndrome lives in the left side of my head. And what I try to do as much as I can is to live in my heart and to just do the work and to not worry about the outcome. And even like in things like this, I try not to prepare anymore. I try to say, Melissa, you're going to speak from your heart. You might fumble a word, but hey, that's human. And as long as we stay in our heart, you don't suffer imposter syndrome, right? Imposter syndrome is ruminating. It's analyzing what you're doing to too big a degree. So I think as long as we know we're at this point and we're here for a reason, and sure, there are going to be decisions we make that aren't right, and there are going to be, times that we don't know. And I also express it. If I'm giving, let's say, a big speech and I'm really nervous and I'm like, why am I speaking in front of all these people? I shouldn't be speaking here. I will start by saying that. When I'll say, listen, I'm not even sure why I'm up here. I'm super nervous. And I always say I'm an introverted creative. Like I don't speak, I create through my hands. Like I'll just share that. And I always see whenever I do that, and it's my truth, I see everyone like relaxes because they're like, oh, she's one of us. And I think when you share, or you say, I'm feeling imposter syndrome right now. I'm feeling like I really shouldn't be here. I find the audience is so much warmer, and those are kind of the best experiences I have, because people, warm up and they're like, you're going to be okay. So I've grown to become better at dealing with that. It's not that I don't experience it, but I try not to allow myself to go there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. I have a feeling on a very just intuitive level. I feel like there is a big desire, especially among women, to replace ambition and that struggle and striving with something a lot softer, a lot more human, a lot more soul, a lot more creative.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel the same? And if so, what would be your advice to these people that have this creative in them, but they haven't really unleashed it into the world?
I love that. So I think the key with creativity is it has to touch humanity. Otherwise, you won't gain any meaning from it. You can do it as a form of play, don't get me wrong. But if you don't have other meaning in your life, you have to make certain that somehow, even if you're giving it away, let's say you love to bake, right? If you're just ultimately baking and baking and baking and no one is gaining from it, you'll start to feel a malaise. It won't lead you to feeling that sense of joy that you need to experience to find meaning. So my only advice is, figure out what that, I call it your seed of self-expression, because a lot of us aren't necessarily creative in that sense, but we all have a form of self-expression, whether it's we can sing, we can dance, we can counsel others. I mean, there's so many beautiful ways you can take something in here and use it to serve humanity. Meaning only comes through service. I mean, that is probably the biggest truth I've learned. So it's only when you take something in you and connect it to something greater than you that you truly find that meaning. So know that, yeah, you can create for fun, but if you really want it to be deeper for you, then I would suggest it doesn't matter. Like I talk to photographers and they're like, well, no one will buy my photos. So I said, so create a blog and just share it with all your friends every day. Share a photo a day. Like there are ways. It doesn't have to be for money. In fact, it shouldn't be for money. Like do it just as a labor of love, but know that others are gaining some sort of joy from it.
Thank you for that. Let's dream for a little bit. Let's say we have a magic wand, and what would your lifelines, what would that look like for
That's
you?
beautiful. Honestly, it's pretty simple. I believe that every person from childhood on should develop a practice. And I feel like this mental health epidemic that we are currently experiencing, and supposedly someone's about to send it to me. There were a whole bunch of articles today that the US State Department started a task force and today has put out a mandate that every single adult gets screened for depression. Like it is truly the next pandemic. So I feel like this whole idea of making meaning has to start from literally preschool on. And this idea of engaging in a holistic practice that nurtures your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being has to start really early on. So my dream is that, our practice, it's called Practice Makes Purpose, because that's the whole point. If you engage in this practice, you do find purpose, would get indoctrinated into the world at age, 3 or 4, and become just woven into the fabric of who we are, so that folks would grow up not searching outside for their meaning, but actually going inward and really discovering what makes their soul sing and pursuing that much earlier on and not falling into despair.
Thank you for that. There is a question from one of our listeners, viewers, and that is, how did you protect the simplicity of your product? How did the simplicity of the product was converted, developed, maintained back when in the Melissa and Doug company?
That is an amazing, amazing question, because as you can guess from my issue with my verses, I don't even call them poems because they were rejected as poems. I still call them verses, but folks want to overcomplicate things, right? That is what we do in society to sort of validate our intellect. And with our toys, all the time, people wanted to make them more complex. People out there, right? And they thought simple toys won't sell. So the only way you live your truth is to define your mission and live it every single day, and do not allow anyone to change it. And the reason we've been so successful is that's what Doug and I did. And trust me, it wasn't easy. Every day people were coming to us, telling us to change it, telling us to do this to it, to adulterate it, to add this. And we just felt so strongly that an open-ended toy, didn't need all those bells and whistles, and it needed the purity and the simplicity of what it was. And we stayed true to that. And I think that's the only reason we're still growing today, is because we didn't let it get adulterated by sort of societal convention and what others thought it should be. So that's why, I always say the road to entrepreneurship is so challenging, because you have to be so dogmatic about what you believe in, and you have to have blinders on. And Doug always says laser-like focus. He uses that word a lot. Like, you have to have that focus on staying your course and not letting anyone come in. And as we started to get, big boards and board members and advisors and investors, it starts to get harder and harder to do that. And of course it does. And, and in some ways, as you grow, you have to change. So I think it's a combination, right? For 30 years, we were able to do it exactly one way. Now that we're super big, because we're a lot bigger now, 1,000 people and so much going on. There are things that do have to change as we grow.
Thank you so much. Simplicity is something I really, really try to live by, and especially with my business and knowing how challenging that is.
Yeah.
I really look up to you, because it's
Thank
just
you.
one of the most challenging things to do, and I think one of the easiest thing for anyone to do to grow faster.
Yeah, even one of the little things I did is, as I started to come out with my truth, like, I stopped wearing makeup, which I'm not against. I think if I had more time, I'd probably wear it. But I thought, you know what? If I'm going to finally stop living a lie, because my whole life I was someone I wasn't, and I truly lived a lie. I'm like, I'm going to come out exactly as I am. And when I went on, national TV, I literally did it without makeup. And I was kind of like, you know what? This is another kind of thumbing my nose at society and saying, like, I don't have to put on the powder. I don't have to do this. Like, if you want to see me and you can either accept me as I truly am, or not accept me at all. And it's not that I'm not against doing like things that, we do to feel good, but it was just one of those small things that I was kind of doing to say, like, I'm going to be my true self. And, but it's not that I don't color my hair or do other things that, it's just one of those little things.
Well, I definitely agree with you on that notion about makeup and hair.
Yeah, it's like in my hair. I just like let it. I don't. And again, not that I'm against. I think it's beautiful when women take the time to look good. It was just, for me, it was just one of those things saying, like take me as I am or don't.
Yeah, exactly. I can talk to you forever, but I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have a favorite verse you would like to share with us?
Oh, I have so many. One of my favorites, and we talked about this today, is about living in the verb and not the noun. I do think life, when we live in the noun, which is the goal, like, I want to be a successful entrepreneur. That's the noun. That's not the joy of life. Life is, I want to create entrepreneurial things. That's living in the verb. So the verse that I love is, it's the learning, not the grade. It's the crafting, not what's made. It's crusading, not the war. It's competing, not the score. It's the acting, not the role. It's the painting, not the goal. It's the journey. I didn't say that right. I have to repeat that one. Sorry.
It's okay.
It's the learning, not the grade. It's the crafting, not what's made. It's crusading, not the war. It's competing, not the score. It's the painting, not the art. It's the acting, not the part. It's the journey, not the goal. For engaging fuels the soul.
Beautiful. You have the most fascinating mind of anyone I've met lately. And I'm just so honored that you.
And there's one other verse that really sort of defines my life. And for maybe many of us, you know, it's, I was solely outcome driven with results deemed black or white. Some days wallowing in anguish, others basking in delight. But a hostage to perfection left me serving time in jail with no courage to take risks or the capacity to fail, till at last I welcome grays to live amidst the other hue, for there's nothing more profound than living life in every hue.
Yay!
So many of us live, you know, very extreme, when it's really about living sort of through the entire spectrum.
Yeah, the highs and the lows and everything in between.
Yeah, it really is. And the more we can accept that that's part of being human and part of who we are, that's when we start to kind of accept ourselves, and then we can be more open to accepting others in their highs and lows too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thanks
for
for
sharing your wisdom. And thank you. And where can people connect with you, learn more about Lifelines, and follow you along?
So lifelinesatwork.com is really everything we're doing now. It's all our content, and we're taking this Practice Makes Purpose and we're turning it into a book, which we're in design right now. That'll come out in the spring, which we're so excited about. And then our regular website is lifelines.com. That's about sort of the whole journey that I took, and that's some of the workshops we do. But we'd love to have any of you join us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thanks for taking your time, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you, Melissa. Have a great day.
You too. Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.